Hello and welcome back to Israel with Aline. Today we are at the foot of Mount Tabor, one of the most beautiful and imposing places in all of Galilee, but mainly a place that witnessed many biblical passages from Deborah, Barak, prophets, wars, but mainly the Transfiguration of Jesus. And together we will climb the mountain and see where everything really happened. So if you are ready, let's get started. Do you want to learn biblical Hebrew? Understand the Bible like never before? Get 20% off for subscribers with Rosen Hebrew School. Click the link in the description to start now. And now, how do we get up there to this practically inaccessible mountain? Throughout history, people climbed all this by walking, including a path that still exists today, which is a staircase that goes up, and the staircase has nothing more and nothing less than 4,300 steps. But it's very worth it to climb, remembering that up there important biblical passages took place, and also probably the Transfiguration of Jesus. But today, folks, as much as I have a lot of goodwill, we're not going to climb all this by walking. If you want me to come back walking another day, let me know. But today we're going to go up by car to make this wonderful climb, see the valleys, the biblical places around here, and get to the top of Mount Tabor. So let's go to the car. And now I want to take advantage of our climb to thank Moti, who is our cameraman, who is always here with us, at least always behind the cameras. And today he is also being our driver. He came driving from Jerusalem. So really thank you very much for being part of this journey with us and creating this content to bring a little more of Israel to you. I wanted to make this little stop. As you can see, it's quite windy here, and I want you to look at this poster. It's written in Hebrew here that this area below is a paragliding takeoff area. And indeed, when we were going up, we saw a paraglider passing by here. So they take advantage of this wind here, as you can see, to take off. But this also shows the strategic point where we are. The mountain is so steep and so high that you can jump off here with a paraglider. And if I'm not mistaken, there are also sometimes people who jump off here with a hang glider. Was Mount Tabor a triple border in ancient times? Yes, 3 different territories met here at this location. The territory of 3 tribes of Israel, Naphtali, Zebulun, and Issachar. And at this time, the people of Israel did not have a king, but each tribe was self-governed. Each tribe was independent, but they could collaborate with each other, especially in times of need, such as periods of war. We know a story that is in the Old Testament, in the book of Judges, when the king of Hazor Jabin is going to go to war with the people of Israel and part of the 12 tribes. And then the prophetess Deborah comes into action, she who prophesied right here in this region, and God orders her to go to Barak. Barak, who was part of the tribe of Naphtali, remember that right here next to it is precisely the territory of the tribe of Naphtali. Deborah goes to Barak and calls him to help defend the people of Israel, as it is written in this passage. Deborah sent for Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kadesh, Naphtali, and said to him, "The Lord, God of Israel, has given the following command. Go and gather your men at Mount Tabor, choosing 10,000 men from the sons of Naphtali and the sons of Zebulun. And I will make Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, come to you at the Kishon River with his chariots and his troops, and I will deliver him into your hands. And as the Bible tells us, Barak with thousands of men climb up here to Mount Tabor to set up camp. And it's a thing that seems a bit strange. Look here where we are. Look at this climb. Imagine the difficulty of climbing up here with thousands of men to set up a camp. It may seem like it doesn't make sense because it's a lot of work to set up a camp up here. But think that strategically this is very important. Because if it's hard to climb up here to set up a camp, it's even harder to climb up here to fight against the camp that's already set up on top of the hill. So Barak and Deborah and their men are camped up here, and down in the valley was Sisera, the army chief of the king of Hazor, and Sisera's chariots were much better than those of Barak and his men. But in the end, the God of Israel was on Barak's side, and they managed to win this great battle here in the valley. As we have seen, many passages from the Old Testament happened here, but the most important biblical story of all, which probably happened here, is precisely in the New Testament, and it is the Transfiguration of Jesus. But why did I say it probably happened here? Because in a little while, when we hear the text of the Transfiguration, you will hear that the text does not say that it happened on Mount Tabor, but rather says that it happened on a high mountain. And most expert people really believe that this is the high mountain where it happened. There is also a second theory that I will talk about in a little while for you. But let's see what the Bible tells us. The Bible says that Jesus was in the city of Caesarea Philippi, and 6 days later he arrives at a high mountain where he makes his transfiguration. Caesarea Philippi is to the north of here, about 43.496 miles away. So walking at a leisurely pace, does it make sense that it would be in this location? The other theory, which is less accepted, is that the Transfiguration perhaps happened on Mount Hermon, because some people believe it's there and not here, mainly for two reasons. Because Mount Hermon is right next to Caesarea Philippi, so it would make sense that one story happened next to the other. But we have to remember once again that 6 days passed between one moment and the other, which would give enough time to get here. And the second reason is also that the Bible says that Jesus' garments became white as light, an intense and bright white. And some people associate this intense white precisely with the snow and the fact that Mount Hermon is white and covered with snow all year round. These are the two reasons that some people believe it happened on Mount Hermon. But if we're really going to talk about the most accepted place, also with a tradition that comes from the ancient period, as we're going to talk about in a little bit, and really the most accepted within the Christian world, we're talking about Mount Tabor. And it also makes sense that it would be on Mount Tabor due to the geographical location around all these biblical sites that are here. Because as we're going to see in a little bit, nothing here or in the Bible is by chance. So enjoy your trip, and we now continue our virtual journey through Mount Tabor. Let's go. This gate was originally built by the Crusaders. We're talking about the Middle Ages. Then it was rebuilt in 1897, and then it was once again, for the last time, renovated in 2018. For example, the metal part that we see is from 2018, but this also shows us how history continues to unfold at this location. Mount Tabor didn't stop 2,000 years ago, but throughout all these centuries, a lot of history continues to happen here. Wars, destructions, reconstructions, pilgrims. Mount Tabor is a living place to this day. But let's now go back to the car to continue our journey. I know that sometimes it can seem a bit strange for us to talk about stories from 2,000 years ago while we are looking at a modern building. So before we go into the church that is here today, let's go into the churches of the past. Here we can see churches from the Byzantine period, so come with me. We can clearly see from the construction that this was really a church. We can see its construction, the apex. So this was a place of Christian worship long before modern times. And people came here to pray not because it was a big city or because it was on their way and they passed by here and decided to stop to pray. As we've already said several times, we are in an isolated place on top of a mountain, more than 4,000 steps to get here. It doesn't make sense that people would want to climb up here to pray if it wasn't for the big reason that Jesus had his transfiguration here. And when I say here, it's not exactly where I'm standing nor where this church is. We don't have an exact point marked on the mountain at the exact location of the Transfiguration, but we know it was probably one of the highest points, and here we are precisely at one of the highest points of Mount Tabor. We also have very old traditions that speak of this place as the location of the Transfiguration, for example, Origen the Christian. Before the year 250, he writes that this is the Mount of Transfiguration. We also have records from other church fathers. And so from the first pilgrims of the Holy Land, they wanted and really climbed up here to the mountain. So let's walk in the buildings that they saw so we can also feel like pilgrims from the past. We have records from the 4th century of pilgrims climbing the mountain to visit this place. And in the 6th century, there were already 3 different churches in this place. One of them is exactly where we are. So truly a place full of history from biblical times and also from the Byzantine period and even to this day. And speaking of the present day, let's see the last church that was built in this place. Don't worry, the main door of the church is closed, but we will still be able to enter here today. Notice something different about this church. It has not 1 but 3 entrances. The main entrance and the 2 side entrances, that is a total of 3 entrances. Also, when we look at the facade, we see that the number 3 is repeatedly here. And the Italian architect Antonio Baluzzi was the one who planned this entire church. And he puts the number 3 here several times precisely to represent Jesus. That is, the large door and the center of the church represents Jesus. And the 2 small sides represent Elijah and Moses, who also present themselves here at the moment of Transfiguration. And we will hear about this in a little while when we read this biblical passage together. But let's now enter from this side. Come here to see whose chapel this is. Notice the floor of this place. These here are pieces of mosaics from the old churches. When they were rebuilding the modern church, they literally took part of these mosaics and brought them here precisely to make this connection from the past to the present of the place. And now notice the painting that is behind me. Who is this man sitting with altars on both sides of him? An altar with fire burning the sacrifice and the other not? This man is Elijah, and here is represented a story that happened not far from here on Mount Carmel, which is the challenge that Elijah made to the prophets of the god Baal. And let's keep going into the church. Up here we see represented the Transfiguration of Jesus in the middle with Elijah and Moses. But notice one more different thing about this place. The main area is here lowered. This is because they wanted to include in the modern church the parts of the old churches. So we can see that exactly here where the altar is exactly where one of these old churches that was built here used to be. And look, up here Moses is represented. The question is, why out of all the biblical characters, out of the hundreds and thousands of people we know from the Old Testament, why does Jesus specifically choose to call here at this very striking moment of the Transfiguration? Why does he choose to call specifically Elijah and Moses? And I want to take advantage of the fact that we are in this very special place at the top of Mount Tabor to listen to the biblical reading of Jesus' transfiguration. 6 days later, Jesus took Peter and the brothers James and John with him and led them up a high mountain privately. And Jesus was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with Jesus. Then Peter, taking the word, said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, a bright cloud enveloped them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to what he says." When they heard that voice, the disciples fell face down, overcome with great fear. Jesus came up and touched them, saying, "Get up, do not be afraid." Then they looked up and saw no one except Jesus. Does Moses represent the law? Did he receive the tablets of the law? And Elijah, was he the greatest of the Old Testament prophets? So here when Jesus calls the two, he shows his connection to the law that was previously given to the people of Israel, and also to the fulfillment of the biblical prophecies that were made by the prophets of the past, for example, also by Elijah. This is also a good reminder that nothing in the Bible is by chance. Everything has a reason to be, everything has a connection, and also often a very large spiritual reason. So it's no coincidence that Mount Tabor, Elijah and Moses were chosen. We are in a very important region, biblically speaking. And just to give us a slightly better idea of the place we are, come with me now as we go up to see the viewpoint. Also notice that there are more archaeological excavations here. You can see parts of a Crusader church that was here, meaning about 800 years ago. Not the 1,500, 1,400 years as we saw before, but also very old. But we climbed up here to show you this view. Here in the background is the Valley of Armageddon, the place that is connected with the return of Jesus and the start of the final battle. Finally, even though the day is a bit cloudy today, we see here the Valley of Armageddon, and also not far from here, only 9 kilometers away, is Nazareth, also Mount Carmel, where Elijah battled. We have many biblical sites here nearby, and from here you really have a privileged view of many of them. But we are here today to talk about the coming of and after his transfiguration. Jesus descends the mountain with his disciples. And also together we are going to descend now to see how this story continues. After the transfiguration, Jesus descends with his 3 disciples from the mountain. And when he arrives here at the lower part, the crowds begin to follow him. At that time, Jesus was at the height of his ministry, and wherever he went, whether it was in Judea, in Galilee, the crowds followed him. We are not sure exactly where this happened, but we know it was after he descended the mountain. A crowd receives him, and he begins to heal their sick, as is written in this passage. The next day, when they came down from the mountain, a large crowd met Jesus. And behold, from the midst of the crowd, a man emerged, saying aloud, "Master, I ask you to look at my son, because he is the only one I have. A spirit seizes him, and suddenly the boy screams, and the spirit convulses him until he foams at the mouth, and hardly leaves him after having mistreated him. I asked your disciples to drive it out, but they could not." Jesus exclaimed, "O unbelieving and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you and bear with you? Bring your son here." As the boy was approaching, the demon threw him to the ground in a convulsion. But Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit, healed the boy, and gave him back to his father. And everyone was amazed at the majesty of God. And this story teaches us a lot about our faith, and the geography of the Holy Land helps us to better understand the biblical passages. But that's what we had for today. I hope you all enjoyed getting to know a little more about Mount Tabor. A kiss and see you next time.